Welcome, everybody, to the Art of Agile Development Book Club. I'm James Shore, and today we're going to be talking about choosing your agility. If you would like to get a copy of the book, it is available now on Amazon. Let me go ahead and put the link in the chat. There it is. So welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about choosing your agility. I'm going to start out by just reading an excerpt from the book, and then I'm going to open it up for all of you to participate in the conversation. So let me go ahead and start Chapter 3, Choose Your Agility. There's no point in Agile for the sake of Agile. Instead, ask yourself two questions. First, will Agile help us be more successful? And second, what will it take to achieve that success? When you can answer these questions, you'll know whether Agile is right for you. In 2014, I partnered with Diana Larson to analyze why companies see such different results from their Agile teams. We had both worked with Agile teams from the beginning. Over the years, we noticed that they tended to see dramatically different types of results, and those results tended to cluster in different zones. We captured these observations in the Agile fluency model. A simplified view is shown in this figure. Each zone is associated with a set of benefits. To reap those benefits, a team needs fluency in that zone. A team has fluency when they're able to apply all the skills associated with the zone without conscious effort. The skills needed for fluency are listed into the introductions to parts 2 through 4. But fluency isn't something a team can achieve on its own. Your organization also has to invest in fluency. That means more than paying lip service to Agile ideas. It has to make actual, meaningful changes that cost time, money, and political capital. The results you get from your Agile teams depend on how well your company buys in to Agile ideas. When a company fails to achieve the results they want from Agile, it's usually because they didn't make the required investments. Often, they didn't even realize what was needed. Make a conscious choice to invest in agility. Consider each zone carefully. Each has costs, each has benefits. Choose the ones that have the right cost-benefit trade-offs for your situation. So that's the topic for today. There are many ways to be Agile, and organizations should choose the ways that are right for them. Our first discussion prompt: which Agile ideas and fluency zones are important for your teams and why? There was a really great discussion on Discord this past week about all these prompts. Again, please raise your hand if you'd like to participate. While you're thinking about it, I'm just going to share some of the things that came up on the Discord. A. Kestner wrote, "I can't pick a single zone. I also think there's no end to improving in each zone. However, the step that I most struggle with is creating an environment where integration testing is as fluid and as easy to work on as manual or unit testing. It's a technical problem, but when I can't solve it, it leads to a team flow and trust problem." And if you'd like to follow along on the Discord, I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat again, just because if you came in a little bit later, you wouldn't be able to see it. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So just raise your hand on Zoom and I will call on you. Drew Bryan said on Discord, "This is an interesting one for me. When I first was exposed to the Agile fluency model, I was in a team that was targeting the optimizing zone. The product team was fully trusted and aligned with the larger business strategy. The team understood customers' needs, explored concepts and new product market opportunities, built new solutions, and influenced the whole company's business trajectory. As I started working with other teams, I questioned why every team didn't want this. Why would you aim for anything else? However, like everything else, over time, I've recognized that every team, product, market, and organization is different. You're right, the cost investment isn't always worth it. And to be honest, some teams are perfectly happy/content in the focusing zone. Personally, I do think the investment/effort in delivering is worth it over the value gained from focusing, even for smaller, simpler, or internal technology products and solutions." So I thought that was a particularly interesting comment. It's quite rare, I think, for organizations and teams to achieve that optimizing fluency where you've got a development team, product team that's fully trusted, aligned, and has the ability to explore concepts and so forth. And sometimes I have the same reaction Drew did. It's, why doesn't everybody just want this? Because it does seem like sort of the obvious pinnacle, the obvious conclusion for Agile, but it is difficult. It is a real political challenge. Although I find myself wondering, is it something that organizations don't do because it's really not worth it? Or is it something that teams and organizations don't do because they feel like the political cost is too high? What do you all think? And I see Drew is on the line. So Drew, thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one. As I mentioned in the comment, and I also think there's an element of safety for the teams and developers. I think some developers and teams like the safety of sort of being told what to do, for lack of a better term, like being able to just sit back, be given a discrete scope of work, focus on it, work through it. The pressure of being out and engaging with end users and customers and understanding the market space better and building that knowledge, I think can be kind of daunting for people at times. And so I think sometimes just depending on the personalities within your team and kind of their level of engagement in a business space and ability to consume and digest that, sometimes has an effect in terms of the team's willingness to step into that role.
I think that's a great point, and it's something that I've certainly seen. In that, I'm one of those people who always wants to be on top of the latest stuff and really in charge of the situation. So it took me a while to realize that, yeah, there are some people who just want to be told this is what to build, and they go off. It's sort of the developer stereotype. To be given an order, go off and program and not worry about what comes out of it. But I think it's a much less effective, you end up with much less effective results, but it is safe, it's comfortable. And if I'm going to be a little bit cynical, it's easier to complain about other people not knowing what they're doing if they're the ones making the decisions instead of you being involved with it. I see a bunch of other hands up, so I'm going to go and move on. Thank you very much, Drew. Afzal, am I pronouncing your name right? Yeah. Let me go ahead and unmute you. Try that again.
Yeah, I think that worked.
Yes, you're coming through. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Drew shared. It's safety and people being in the comfort zone. For example, one of the Scrum Masters told me yesterday that she's looking for project manager role. That was her previous role. And she said Agile and Scrum are very complicated. I understand and respect her opinion and what she wants to do. But that goes along with I was reminded of that when Drew shared that, because people want to be where they are comfortable, they are safe, they know exactly what to do. And I'm a Scrum Master and also a lead for other Scrum Masters. So I'm in that predicament, like chicken and egg, and where do I start? Where do I go? So that's one thing. The other thing is the leaders, especially, they probably haven't tasted the success that comes with Agile. So they probably haven't looked beyond their world of what they can accomplish using agility and lean and so on. So that could be another reason. And there is no one to really show them what could be a better place to be. And begin with the end in mind. So they don't have the end in mind. So they probably don't know what optimizing looked like, and they haven't even see how focusing and delivering phases look like in their organization. So that could be the other side of that coin.
Yeah, I think both of those are really good points. I mean, it is uncomfortable to go through change. And that's something I do a lot as a consultant. I get invited in to help companies introduce aspects of Agile. And it's really, when people are going through change, it's really tempting to just go back and go back to your familiar and comfortable ways of working and not not express yourself. And a big part of the change work I do, we'll talk about this when we get to the Invest in Change book club session in a couple of weeks. But a big part of what I do is not so much teach people how Agile works, but help them be comfortable getting out of their comfort zone, or not necessarily help them be comfortable with it, but push them a little bit to embrace that discomfort. And then the other point you made about leaders being unaware of the success that's possible with Agile, I think that's also a really good point, in that Agile's been around long enough and has been watered down enough by the various folks out there that I don't think people are, I think many organizations think of Agile as just another project management methodology where you put in your ceremonies, you rename your project managers to scrum masters, you put in your ceremonies. I've actually heard people say this. I think I mentioned this last week. We need somebody to run the ceremonies, and then we're Agile. Yeah. And it's not really a conscious choice. We're doing this because it's going to get this result. We're doing Agile because that's what everybody else does. Yeah. Thanks very much, Afzal. Mike, welcome back. Oh, you're going to have to unmute. Let me try that again.
Okay.
There you go.
Hola. I liked both what Drew and Afzal were saying. And yeah, I agree that safety is part of it, and comfort. I was glad comfort came up in the second conversation you just had, because I think that's also a big part of it. And not experiencing it is also, right? If you haven't experienced it, then why would you? You're now going into a leap of faith kind of mode, right? And I know when I was, my first time experiencing Agile was XP in 2000. And then the .bomb happened, and that company disappeared, vaporized. But my next job after that was actually a full-on hardcore waterfall gig, like 6 months of documentation and design, then 6 months of coding, then 6 months of design and documentation, the thud thing, right? Documents that are 200-300 pages long. I was miserable because I'd already tasted XP, right? So I started advocating. Hey, there's this other way of working. And finally, I got an executive director to go, okay, Rizzy, make it happen. And I'm like, whoa. I did it. I don't know how to have an org change to do it. And he's like, you're smart, do it, right? And I kind of had this assumption that it was like obviously good, right? So I went down the naive path of like explaining it. Hey, if we do it this way, we do it this way, this will be obviously a great thing, right? And it totally failed. My attempted transformation, for air quotes around it, was a total failure, because to me it was obvious, but they didn't experience it. So all they had was words and Rizzy trying to convince us, kind of thing. So that was a big learning experience for me. The other thing regarding what a couple other folks were saying was we do have a large numbers growth of people in our field, right? In other words, we're having a lot more people entering engineering. And so there's sort of a dilution going on. In other words, mentors who have experienced it are now, the percentage of them versus new people who've never done, quote, real Agile, is thinner. So there's less surface area contact between people who've done it and experienced it and all these new folks. I think that's also part of the issue. I think those are all my main points.
Yeah.
Education. Yeah. One last one. Education. Sorry, man. I know I can go on. I think our education for software engineers is still mired in the old leader of Coke, mushroom in the corner mythos of what us software engineers are. I don't think the education system still thinks of it as, has gotten to the point where it's a collaborative, and you think of more than just writing code, that it's understanding the value you're bringing to customers. It's the whole lean startup, lean, Agile, all this stuff rolled in together. I think it's still like, I don't even think they teach unit testing, really, frankly, or TDD. So there's a disconnect there too, with this large ingrowth of people who don't have the skills, who think it's the old way of just give me a task and leave me alone kind of thing. So now my rant is over.
Yeah, thank you. Well, those are a lot of good points. I'm just going to latch on a couple of them. Then we're going to move on to the next question. This has been a great conversation already. Thank you all. And we've got 3 more prompts, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. But I do want to comment. You said it was a leap of faith, and I think one of the things that we saw in the early days of Agile, there's this idea of this technology adoption curve. I forget who came up with it. Perhaps you remember, Mike. Oh, you're muted again. Well, I'll just not remember who it was. Anyway, it talks about first you've got the innovators, and then the early adopters, and then the early majority, and then the late majority, and then the laggards. And I feel like right now we're very much in the late majority stage for the name Agile, if not necessarily the true ideas of Agile. But it's the people who are the innovators and early adopters who are willing to take that leap of faith. And those folks have moved on. Agile is no longer really interesting to them in a lot of days. Although, part of what I'm hoping to accomplish in my book is rekindle some of that enthusiasm amongst this masses of new people that, hey, some of whom are going to be interested in being innovative, that, hey, there is more out here than you thought. And there's a chance to be innovative and an early adopter of something that most people have not yet adopted. But there's a sort of a psychological difference between those different categories. And it's that leap of faith really only comes in the early stages. Perhaps we can talk about that and your other points more, but I'm going to move on to the next question. Thank you very much, Mike. So our next prompt is, which aspects of Agile has your organization chosen to embrace, and how did it make that choice? By the way, Mike, you still had your hand up, but I put it down for you. Feel free to raise it if you wanted to comment. So which aspects of Agile has your organization chosen to embrace, and how did it make that choice? Lots of great comments on this one as well on the Discord. Jared Utah wrote, when I read the section, what do organizations value? The last line leapt off the page at me. Increasing capacity, hiring, retention, morale, skill development, and automation. Because this is exactly what my company is focused on right now, especially the hiring and automation parts. I think they realize that unless there is demonstrable culture where each employee is valued for their contributions and valued as a person, they won't be able to attract new people in this very tight labor market. Also, without automation, so much time is spent on manual testing and deployment that it is difficult to react to customer needs. Agile is definitely something that our company talks about. However, after reading the first chapter, I see we have a long way to go. So what do you all think? What aspects of Agile has your organization chosen to embrace, and how did it make that choice? Feel free to raise your hand and join in again. There's always going to be some people who are more interested in participating, and some people who are more interested in just observing. Sarah Horan von Trees, I hope I'm Van Trees, I think, said, and I noticed that she's on the line, so maybe she'll go into this in a little bit more detail. She said, I bet that many people in my org would say we've embraced Agile and then point you to a list of ceremonies and buzzwords, something I've seen myself. And yet we lack agility, and at least within my group, we are not seeing the benefits. I joined about a year ago, and in my role, I engage closely with 2 to 3 teams in the org. I'm seeing this across all teams I work with. No single Agile practice is egregiously the culprit. Rather, the whole is far worse than the sum of the parts. Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Further thoughts on that, I should say.
Yeah, I think that meets that definition of the cargo cult Agile, and that's definitely, to me, kind of feels like the biggest problem we're facing right now. Doing the ceremonies, doing buzzwords. There's a lot of good investment in automation. A lot of good investment in. I think heading in the right direction for TDD, heading in the right direction for pair programming, but just not really getting benefit out of even those things, like just missing the mark a little bit. But then organizationally, I mean, those are practices that are more team focused. Organizationally, though, there's problems I feel that are we've tried to kind of adopt things at this really big organizational level. Like, let's make everybody on the same sprint cycle. Let's have demos that are every team together. So all these things that then kind of take away from some of what the reason behind a lot of those, the value behind a lot of what those things were supposed to add. And so they're just filler, and they're not actually getting us to the next step. So I feel like what I'm hoping to see would be taking a step back from some of those things and trying to say, okay, well, why did those practices exist? Why what was the reason and the benefit behind them? And we're not getting it. So let's look at it again, and we don't have to completely dismantle everything, but something needs to be changed.
So that's interesting, because if you're talking about pairing, and please stay on the line, I'm going to ask you some questions. Yeah. We're talking about pairing, we're talking about TDD. That's not a small investment. That's a fairly serious investment, much more than I see in a lot of companies that have cargo called Agile, where it's really just, rename some people to Scrum Masters, do sprints and stand-ups and call it a day. So they're obviously making an effort. Why do you think it is that that's missing the mark? How is that? What is it that you think that they could do or perhaps should be doing that they're not doing?
So I think pairing and the TDD are where we're getting the closest to hitting the mark, and that's, I think, because those are practices that can be within a small team to own, in terms of how that is, as opposed to being kind of an organizational approach to something. The team is able to kind of own that. I think TDD is we got to get the team kind of trained a little bit to work that way. So I think that there's all the kind of hurdles of stepping in it together, and when you have developers who kind of have come from a different approach to even unit testing. But all of those are to be expected. I feel like those are the things that actually are moving us kind of in the right direction. We just haven't hit the mark on it. But it's more of the organizational things outside of that are really the problem for us. So
yeah.
And it's been a lot too. I think a lot of turnover, which I think everybody's probably seeing right now, or at least that's what the news articles have led me to believe.
Yeah,
and it just really makes you realize how much people and a team dynamic and the structure on the team matters. So it's hard to do effective pairing when it's like everybody is a really junior, and there's all of a sudden a gap in the team structure from that perspective, or when everybody is new to, even if you're not junior, if you're brand new to the company and to the code base and to the problems that we're trying to solve, then it's hard to effectively find the right way to set up pairing, in some of those scenarios. Or if you don't have enough people on the team, all of those things are things that we've been hit by with because of turnover.
Yeah. That's the Great Resignation, the so-called Great Resignation that everybody's talking about. That is definitely making everything harder. And as a coach, helping an organization with a transformation right now, one of the things that's hardest for me is being remote, because the way I coach often is just walk around and observe, and people come up to me and ask questions, and I sit down with people temporarily. And I don't know how to do that remotely. There is no, sort of convenient, incidental conversations. I don't even know the people that I'm coaching, or I'm coaching the organization. I don't know the people and the teams as well as I typically am used to, even though often don't typically coach every single team. I often know what they're facing and what's going on, but this time I don't.
Yeah, that's been, I think, an issue too. A lot of people joining remote is a little different than having worked in the office and then went remote, where in terms of teams kind of finding that natural dynamic that you see teams kind of start to form when things start to work well together. So
yeah. Thank you very much, Sarah. Mike, I see your hand up. I'm going to introduce this is the next couple of prompts I think are going to generate a lot of discussion. I'm going to introduce the next prompt, Mike, and then I'm going to invite you to go ahead and share your thoughts while people think about that. So the next prompt is, what does your organization want from Agile? So this is different from what aspects of Agile your organization wants to embrace. What does your organization want from Agile, and how do its investments reflect those goals? So while people are thinking about that, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to follow up with the previous conversation if you like.
It was in your comment about trying to reproduce the in-person thing. My team has discovered recently in the last month a technique that has enabled us to do that. If you want me to share it, it's probably 2 or 3 sentences to describe it.
Yeah, please.
So what we decided to do, because we've lamented the lack of in-person. So we're using WebEx, but you can do the same thing with Zoom. We have the stand-up in the morning, and we keep that Zoom or WebEx open all day. And we create breakout rooms for pairs and mobs. And so we're all in one of those rooms all day.
Yeah.
Or in the main room, or we'll create a breakout room for ourselves to just have some quiet time by ourselves. So there is that, and we came to an agreement to follow the sort of the same social norms that you have in person. When you show up at a pairing station, 2 people are pairing, and they're deep in conversation, you then evaluate and go, is my question enough to interrupt them, or should I just leave them alone? And I'm going to leave them alone. All those kind of social norms that we do, be mindful of it in a remote way. And they love it. It's been a really interesting technique, and the product owners like it too, because they can drop in and observe. So that's been an interesting experiment the last month.
That's a great anecdote. Thank you. I've tried something similar. And it hasn't worked as well with the organization I'm working with right now. Not, I think, because it's not a good idea, but because this is a group of people. It's sort of your classic situation where there are, n number of engineers and n times 2 things that everybody is expected to get done. So everybody's fragmented and and everybody's working completely independently. So the big challenge for the organization I'm with right now is learning how to work together. And there's not a lot of comfort with that. And then add on top of that, they're using Microsoft Teams, which is probably my least favorite video conferencing tool, mostly because it kills my computer's CPU. It's extremely, extremely CPU heavy, but it also does not allow you to move around between rooms. You must be assigned to a room by a moderator. So, and of course, they for IT reasons, are stuck with this particular tool, so they can't change it. But for those of you who are not stuck with it, I have tried what Mike's talking about, and even in my group where people are not really used to working together, seen some success with it. I think it's something that really is worth trying. So I'm going to go back to. I'm going to actually, because time is passing quickly. This has already been a great conversation. And again, thank you everybody for participating. I'm going to sort of combine these next 2 prompts and just invite people to speak up however they like. I see some stuff going into the chat. Love for those of you who are putting material in the chat to come on and raise your hand and say it out loud as well, so that people who watch the video can benefit from it. So again, prompt number 3, the third prompt was, what does your organization want from Agile, and how do its investments in agility reflect those goals? And then building on top of that, if you could change anything, what would you improve about your team or organization's approach to Agile? And I'll let you all think about that. There was Ahmed Avez responded to that third prompt about what does your organization want from Agile. He said, my current organization wants to attract customers that are significantly younger than the primary persona and current segment. We have a ton of legacy software and maintenance issues that makes responding to market demands and changing expectations painfully slow. They hope Agile will solve for that. So I love that that's like, it's a really clear, concrete, here's the problem we have, here's what we want to solve. And then he goes on to say, there's an increasing number of calls for predictability and return on investment in the Agile transformation. They might be approaching an amber organization while hoping for results of a teal organization, borrowing from Laloux's terminology. So that thing that Ahmed is seeing is something that I see frequently as well. They started out with a really clear statement of what they wanted to accomplish and why, but in a big organization, Agile change takes a long time. And it's really common for me to see a situation where people start out and then they don't get immediate results, and they don't get even results necessarily that they want within 6 months or a year. And then they've opened Pandora's box, and they slap the lid back on right before hope comes out, and they see the changes that they're wanting. So they start redirecting towards, well, we really need to focus on predictability. So I asked about that. I said, what happened there? And Ahmed said, it was originally about reducing friction and handoffs, but 18 months in, now the predictability is a new thing. Work from home and post-pandemic likely have played a role. And then we went on, and if you want to see more, see the Discord. I am seeing some comments in the chat. I'm wondering if any of you would like to raise your hand and appear on camera, so we can have a conversation about it. Jay. Oops. Jay, I just muted you instead of unmuting you. Go ahead.
How about now? Okay. Yeah, I noticed something at one company where they were working on a product that had dozens of teams working all on the same code base and the same product, and they had a lot of technical debt built up that they wanted to address so that they could ship with higher quality and ship much more often. And when they thought about how they wanted to approach that, at the exec level, it was easy for them to say things like, we should break up our monolithic code base into chunks. And maybe we will fund one team whose job it is to go carve things up. Or we'll direct all the teams to carve their local thing. But for me as a developer working on one particular area of the code, the problem might not be I'm not carved out. It might be none of the variable names make any sense in this code. I can't read it. Mm-hmm. And I need to take time today to make it readable. And it's really hard at the exec level to give a directive that all developers should make their code readable, because that means different things in different contexts, or to give the directive, you should clean up whatever problem is most relevant to you in your context. And so I don't know, I thought of this after hearing Sarah talk earlier, just this idea of like, how do you make a large organization transformation, agile adoption, where the needs locally vary? How do you support that at the high level without giving explicit directives that aren't appropriate in each context?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I know you've worked with Arlo Belshi in the past, and you're probably aware that this is something that he's put a lot of thought and effort into. And I don't think I can do his ideas justice, but it very much revolves around helping executives give teams permission to do what they need to do, and helping the teams learn how to do what they need to do, as opposed to sort of making these blanket one-size-fits-all statements. One thing that I see that often prevents teams from, cleaning up whatever is relevant, because that's often what's needed in these bigger, older code bases, is that people have just rushed through, or even if they didn't rush, code tends to degrade over time. You've got to really put a lot of work and thought into keeping it clean. It's so common that I see that developers believe that they must go as fast as possible. And sometimes that belief comes from pressure from other people in the organization, like sales, marketing, and product managers, product owners. And sometimes it comes from sort of this internally held belief that I am valuable because I crank out code, or I'm valuable because I crank out features as a result of cranking out code. So I think there is this aspect of cultural change and helping teams understand that success is more than just shipping features as fast as possible. And I'm going to invite you to respond to that.
Yeah, I've seen the same patterns. And I notice that I internalize a lot of these beliefs as well. I think, I better keep delivering. I got to ship this next bug fix right away. And I watch other developers around me do it as well. And then I'll hear from our management, and I'll notice our managers are saying something different. And the conversation we tell, the developers tell each other is, we don't have time to do this, or we have to ship this thing right away. We can't go clean this thing up. Management doesn't want us to do that. And then I go ask managers, is that really what you want? And they'll say, no, we want you to have a long-term interest of the company at heart when you do this work. And it's amazing how deeply we have absorbed these beliefs as developers. And so to untangle that, I have to get managers speaking differently and developers listening and go work through all that. It's a tough thing to untangle.
It sure is. And I think what you said there about managers speaking differently, but developers hearing, I can't count the number of times where I've been in a conversation and I've seen person A say X and person B not hear it. It was obvious from their response that it just did not pass from their ears to the brain. It's a really interesting phenomenon. And when you start looking for it, you'll see it everywhere. Thanks very much, Jay. I'm going to invite Sarah to go ahead and share her thoughts. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll add on, I think, to what Jay just said, and you're saying as well. So I was a manager for a while, and that was a very hard thing to do, was to really convince the team to can have trust in the, no, really what I'm saying is this, and that's actually what I mean. It took a lot of investment to do that. And I work now more kind of as I'm not a manager, but I'm still working in like a leadership coaching aspect with a lot of the teams. And that's continues to be the conversation. And you really have to get to a point where you're kind of reading people and saying, okay, I'm seeing that this is I can still see you're not hearing this, or I can see that anxiety behind this, and it shouldn't be that. Like we're trying to build towards something, and I'm just getting the hang of it remotely too. I think to come back to that earlier topic, one of the things I saw in the chat, which is why I raised my hand, was I think Peak, I think is who said it, about smaller changes, about thinking in terms of smaller changes. That's another problem that I think is a hard one to tackle, and that I'm seeing it as also hard to coach. Although I think we're starting to get there in terms of thinking through the problem in okay, yeah, that's great. This is the big problem that we want to try to solve. But what can we do to reframe it as something that we can iterate on, or frame it on something that what could be the MVP here, or even before that, what could be a chunk of this in terms of breaking the work down. And I've pivoted a lot lately to that, because it feels like all these other practices that we're doing, all these other ceremonies, all these other things, we could get better at them. But the problem of not breaking the work down is such an impedance in front of that it doesn't feel like the most important thing to solve. So,
yeah, breaking the work down is certainly something that I see teams have trouble with, often because a lot of the engineers I speak to are really focused on engineering tasks, but breaking the work down well requires thinking about what's the business value and how can we break that into smaller pieces that can be shipped and see value. And that is a mindset shift that I find people really struggle with. And I don't know how to teach it so much. I mean, obviously I tried in the book, but the way I teach it for real is I just go through case after case after case and like real world examples with the teams I'm working with. And we have to work it out each time sort of from scratch. Thanks very much, Sarah. Anthony, welcome. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. So I just wanted to pick up on that point that Sarah raised about breaking things down. And that's something that our team is currently struggling with at the moment. We're working in automotive software, and we've got a lot of background of heavy investment in design up front, primarily because we've got high functional safety requirements, and we need to have strong traceability from our requirements through to code and testing and things like that. And so there's a lot of background in designing everything up front, and so that then means that then we think of tasks, and naturally we try and break things down, but we still end up with larger chunks than are perhaps ideal, which then then means that then it takes longer to do. It's harder to merge. It's harder to review the code when you're trying to merge and things like that. So there's a lot of difficulty there. I mean, it's something that our Scrum Masters made us pick up. We've got an ongoing task to try and split tasks as we introduce them, but that is something that we need to work with. So yeah, and the current the remote working does make things difficult at the moment. We're split across a team across 3 time zones, which span the world. We've got people in the US, people in Europe, and people in Japan. So they actually, getting times when everybody in the team is available is pretty much impossible.
Those are both really tough challenges. Oh, I'm sorry, Anthony, you were still talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just finishing off. So yes, go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Thank you very much. Both of those are really tough challenges. The time zones, of course, are a really hard challenge. And also design up front tends to push you towards doing more and more bigger chunks, which makes things slower and harder, which pushes you towards doing bigger chunks. Is something I've seen over and over again. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'd love to keep going, but that is actually our time for the day. So I'm going to wrap us up. First off, the book giveaway. It is a random drawing for everyone who participated in last week's session or the Discord conversation. If you participated today, please direct message me in the chat your name and email address so I can put you in the hat if you'd like to be entered in the drawing for next week. Those on the Discord, of course, I will just direct message you on the Discord. To participate more easily, please do join that Discord, and that way anybody who is part of that conversation will automatically be entered. There is the invite link one more time. And this week's winner is Jeffrey Palermo. So congratulations, Jeffrey. I don't think he's on the line, but I will contact him on Discord. Next week, there will be another drawing. And next week's conversation is going to be invest in agility, one of the most important conversations or one of the most important chapters in the book. And I think one of the most important things about Agile is how do you actually create an environment where Agile can be successful? So I hope you will all join me next week and participate in the upcoming conversation next week on the Discord. Other than that, that is it for us today. Thank you very much for attending, and I will see you all next time.